Manipulative behavior, emotional control, and seductive influence can completely destroy relationships and communities when they come from someone operating under a Jezebel spirit. This ancient spiritual force has been wreaking havoc on families, churches, and friendships for thousands of years, and today it's more active than ever before. The Jezebel spirit doesn't just show up in obvious ways. It works through people who seem charming, helpful, and even spiritual on the surface. These individuals can infiltrate your inner circle and slowly begin to control and manipulate everyone around them. What makes this spirit so dangerous is how it operates through deception and false intimacy. The person carrying this spirit will often present themselves as your closest ally, your most trusted friend, or your spiritual mentor. They know exactly what to say and how to say it to gain your trust and admiration. But underneath this attractive exterior lies a spirit that seeks to dominate, control, and ultimately destroy the very people it claims to love and support. Today we're going to expose 5 clear signs that someone in your life may be operating under this destructive spiritual influence. These signs are not just religious concepts, but real behaviors that affect real people in real situations every single day. It is crucial that you don't skip any part of this video because each sign builds on the previous one. To save yourself time while getting all the important information, watch this video at 1.5 or 2 times speed instead of jumping around or skipping sections. Think about that person who walked into your life like they were your long-lost best friend. They complimented everything about you from day one. Your hair looked amazing, your ideas were brilliant, and suddenly you felt like the most important person in the room. It felt good, didn't it? Well, here's something that might surprise you. That overwhelming charm you experienced wasn't love or genuine friendship. It was the first weapon in a spiritual battle you didn't even know you were fighting. The Jezebel spirit has one superpower that fools almost everyone. It can make people feel absolutely incredible about themselves in record time. This spirit operates through individuals who become masters of saying exactly what you need to hear. They don't just give you regular compliments. They give you the kind of praise that makes you feel like you've been waiting your whole life to hear those words. The problem is it's all carefully planned. Here's how this works in real life. Someone with this spirit will study you like you're their favorite subject in school. They watch how you react to different types of attention. They notice what makes you smile, what makes you feel important, and what makes you feel loved. Then they use this information like a weapon disguised as a gift. They will shower you with the exact type of affection and validation you've been craving, often from the very first conversation. But here's where things get dangerous. This person will start sharing incredibly personal information with you way too quickly. They will tell you their deepest secrets, their biggest fears, and their most embarrassing moments. Why would they do this? Because when someone shares their secrets with you, your brain automatically thinks they trust you completely. And when you think someone trusts you, you naturally start trusting them back. It's like emotional trickery that bypasses all your normal safety systems. The scary part is how different this feels from real kindness. When someone genuinely cares about you, their attention feels steady and consistent. But when the Jezebel spirit is involved, the attention feels almost addictive. It's so intense and so perfectly designed for your personality that it creates an emotional high that's hard to walk away from. You start craving their approval and validation because they've made you feel more special than anyone else ever has. This spirit knows that most people are walking around feeling undervalued and unappreciated, so it swoops in and makes you feel like the most amazing person on the planet. But here's the truth that will change how you see these situations forever. Real love and friendship build you up without making you dependent. False intimacy makes you feel incredible, but also makes you need that person's approval to feel good about yourself. The first sign someone is possessed by a Jezebel spirit is this overwhelming charm and instant emotional connection that feels too good to be true. Because honestly, it usually is too good to be true. When someone makes you feel like you've found your soulmate, your perfect friend, or your ideal mentor within days or weeks of meeting them, Your warning bells should start ringing. Genuine relationships take time to develop. But the Jezebel spirit doesn't have time for that. It needs to hook you quickly before you have a chance to think clearly about what's really happening. There's a woman I once heard about who thought she had found the most generous friend in the world. This friend would show up with expensive gifts, offer to pay for dinners, and even helped with rent money during tough times. For months, this woman felt so grateful and blessed to have such an amazing person in her life. But then something strange started happening. Every time she tried to make a decision without asking her friend's opinion, there would be drama. Every time she spent time with other people, her friend would get hurt and upset. And every time she didn't respond to texts fast enough, there would be guilt trips about how much her friend had sacrificed for their friendship. What this woman didn't realize was that every gift, every favor, and every act of kindness had been carefully planned investments. Her friend wasn't being generous out of love. She was building an emotional debt that could be collected whenever control was needed. This is exactly how the Jezebel spirit operates through people to gain total power over others. The second sign someone is possessed by a Jezebel spirit is their ability to make you feel emotionally responsible for their feelings while using your personal information as weapons against you. Let me explain how this works, because once you see it, you can never unsee it. First, they collect your personal information, like they're building a file on you. During those early conversations where they shared their secrets, they were also getting you to share yours. They remember every insecurity you mentioned, every fear you expressed, and every dream you talked about. They store this information and use it later to control your behavior. When you don't do what they want, they'll bring up your insecurities to make you doubt yourself. When you try to set boundaries, they'll remind you of your fears to make you feel guilty. But here's where it gets really twisted. They create emotional debt through false generosity. Just like that woman's friend, they will do things for you that seem incredibly kind, but always come with invisible strings attached. They might pay for your lunch, but later they'll remind you of their generosity when they want you to cancel plans with someone else. They might offer to help you with a problem, but then they'll use that help as proof that you owe them loyalty and obedience. The Jezebel spirit also uses guilt, shame, and fear, like a master artist uses paintbrushes. When you don't respond the way they want, they become the victim. They'll say things like how much they've sacrificed for you, how disappointed they are, or how they thought you were different from other people who have hurt them. They make you feel responsible for their emotional state, even when their emotions are reactions to you having healthy boundaries. Perhaps the most dangerous thing they do is position themselves as absolutely necessary in your life. They solve problems that they often created in the first place. They become your go-to person for advice, your shoulder to cry on, and your biggest supporter. But slowly, they start making comments that separate you from other relationships. They might say things like how your family doesn't really understand you like they do, or how your other friends don't really care about you the way they do. The goal is to make you emotionally dependent on them while cutting you off from other sources of support and perspective. They want to be the only voice you trust, the only opinion that matters, and the only relationship that feels safe and understanding. But here's the reality check that will save you from this trap. Healthy relationships make you feel more connected to other people, not less connected. Real friends encourage your other friendships. Genuine supporters want you to have multiple sources of wisdom and love in your life. When someone makes you feel like you can't make good decisions without them, like you owe them constant gratitude, or like you're responsible for keeping them happy, you're dealing with emotional manipulation that goes way beyond normal human selfishness. This is spiritual warfare disguised as friendship, and recognizing it is the first step to breaking free from its control. And hey, if this information is already opening your eyes to some relationships in your life, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because we're just getting started with exposing how this spirit operates. Now, what I'm about to share with you will completely revolutionize how you look at certain people in your life, and I promise you that by the end of this section, you'll have tools that most people never learn in their entire lifetime. This information is so powerful that it can literally save you from years of confusion, heartbreak, and spiritual attack. The third sign someone is possessed by a Jezebel spirit is their use of sexual energy and inappropriate boundaries to gain control and influence. Now, before you think this only applies to obvious situations, let me tell you something that will shock you. This spirit doesn't just work through people who are trying to seduce you into bed. It works through people who use sexual tension, flirtation, and inappropriate intimacy to make you compromise your values and create unhealthy soul ties. Here's what this looks like in real life, and I guarantee you'll recognize these patterns once I explain them. Someone operating under this spirit has a way of making every interaction feel slightly charged with sexual or romantic energy, even when the relationship isn't supposed to be romantic at all. They might be your co-worker, your friend, your mentor, or even someone in your church, but somehow conversations with them always feel more intense and more intimate than they should. They dress in ways that draw sexual attention, but they do it cleverly so it doesn't look obvious. They might wear clothes that are just tight enough, just low-cut enough, or just revealing enough to make people notice their body without being able to call them out for dressing inappropriately. They speak with subtle sexual undertones, double meanings, and implications that make you feel like there's always something more happening beneath the surface of your conversations. But here's where it gets really dangerous. They create sexual tension even in relationships where sex should never be part of the equation. They might touch you just a little too long during a handshake, stand just a little too close during conversations, or make comments about your appearance that feel more personal than they should. They make you think about them in ways you normally wouldn't think about someone in their position. The goal isn't always to get you into bed, though sometimes that's part of it. The goal is to create a connection that goes beyond normal friendship or professional relationships. They want to hook you emotionally and spiritually through sexual energy because sexual connection creates some of the strongest soul ties between people. Even if nothing physical ever happens, they're creating spiritual and emotional bonds that give them access to your heart and mind in ways that normal relationships don't provide. Here's the part that will absolutely blow your mind. They use this seductive energy to make you compromise your own standards and values without you even realizing it's happening. Maybe you find yourself dressing differently when you know you'll see them. Maybe you find yourself sharing more personal information than you usually would. Maybe you find yourself making excuses to spend time with them or thinking about them more than you think about other people in similar roles in your life. The Jezebel spirit is a master at making people feel special through sexual attention and romantic energy, even when romance isn't appropriate for the relationship. It feeds off the excitement, the secrecy, and the feeling of being chosen by someone who seems so attractive and desirable. But here's what you need to understand. This isn't real attraction or real connection. It's spiritual manipulation designed to give someone access to your soul through pathways that God designed to be protected and sacred. When you feel confused about your feelings towards someone, when you find yourself compromising your values to please them, or when you feel like there's sexual or romantic tension in a relationship where it doesn't belong, you might be dealing with someone who is using seductive spiritual manipulation to control you. The fact that you recognize these patterns already puts you miles ahead of most people who get caught in these traps without ever understanding what happened to them. This knowledge you're gaining right now is incredibly valuable, and if you want to support the work we're doing to help people recognize and break free from spiritual manipulation, you can leave a donation by clicking the thanks button just below this video. Every bit of support helps us continue creating content that changes lives and protects people from spiritual attacks they never saw coming. Now let's continue, because what we're about to cover next will completely expose one of the most dangerous ways this spirit operates. What I'm about to teach you is a lesson that could save your spiritual life and protect your relationship with God from one of the most dangerous attacks the enemy has ever designed. This information is not something you should take lightly or forget about after this video ends. This is knowledge that needs to become part of how you evaluate every spiritual relationship and every person who claims to have special access to God's voice. The fourth sign someone is possessed by a Jezebel spirit is their pattern of positioning themselves as spiritually superior while systematically undermining your direct relationship with God. This is perhaps the most devastating thing this spirit does, because it doesn't just attack your emotions or your relationships with other people, it attacks your connection to the very source of truth, wisdom, and spiritual protection in your life. Someone operating under this spirit will present themselves as having a special relationship with God that other people don't have. They'll claim to receive direct revelations, prophetic words, and divine instructions that somehow always seem to benefit them or give them control over other people. They speak with such confidence about what God is saying that you start to doubt your own ability to hear from God directly. Here's how this destroys people spiritually. They'll tell you things like how God showed them something special about your life, your future, or your calling. But somehow these revelations always seem to make you more dependent on them for spiritual guidance. They'll claim that God told them you need to do certain things, make certain decisions, or avoid certain people. And because they present these instructions as coming directly from God, questioning them feels like you're questioning God himself. The Jezebel spirit is incredibly clever about using scripture and spiritual language to control people. They'll quote Bible verses, but they'll twist the meaning to support their agenda. They'll talk about submission, obedience, and God's will, but they'll define these concepts in ways that make you submit to them rather than to God. They'll use fear of spiritual consequences to keep you in line, making you afraid that disobeying them is the same as disobeying God. But here's the most heartbreaking part of how this operates. They systematically destroy your confidence in your own spiritual discernment. Every time you have a different sense about something than they do, they'll make you feel like you're not spiritual enough, not mature enough, or not connected to God enough to trust your own spiritual instincts. They'll position themselves as your spiritual covering, your prophet, or your spiritual parent, in ways that make you feel like you need their permission and approval to make spiritual decisions. When you start to question them or notice inconsistencies in their behavior, they'll present themselves as martyrs or persecuted prophets. They'll claim that people always reject God's messengers, that you're being deceived by the enemy, or that your questioning is proof that you're backsliding spiritually. They make you feel like having doubts about them is the same as having doubts about God. The Jezebel spirit also creates spiritual dependency that replaces your personal relationship with God. Instead of encouraging you to pray, read scripture, and seek God's voice for yourself, they become your source of spiritual information and divine guidance. They want to be the mediator between you and God, the interpreter of God's will for your life, and the authority on what spiritual truth looks like. Here's the reality that will set you free from this spiritual trap. God desires a direct personal relationship with every one of his children. He doesn't need a human mediator other than Jesus Christ to communicate with you. He doesn't speak to other people about your life more clearly than he speaks to you. And he definitely doesn't contradict his written word to give someone special authority over your spiritual decisions. When someone claims to have special spiritual authority over you, when they discourage you from seeking God directly, or when they make you feel spiritually inferior and dependent on their guidance, you're not dealing with a true servant of God. You're dealing with someone who is using spiritual manipulation to control you, and this is one of the most dangerous forms of spiritual abuse that exists. Real spiritual leaders point you toward God, not toward themselves. They encourage your personal relationship with God, not your dependence on them. They submit their revelations to Scripture, not the other way around. And they produce fruit in your life that looks like freedom, peace, and spiritual growth, not fear, confusion, and spiritual dependency. Now take a moment and think about the relationships in your life that have been damaged or destroyed by someone else's influence. Think about the families you've seen torn apart by conflict, the friendships that ended in betrayal and bitterness, the churches that split because of division and strife. Now think about whether there was one person who seemed to be at the center of most of that chaos, someone who was always involved when relationships started falling apart. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to leave a trail of broken relationships wherever they go? Have you ever noticed how certain individuals always seem to be in the middle of drama, conflict, and division, but somehow they always manage to present themselves as the innocent victim? Have you ever watched someone systematically turn people against each other while maintaining their own reputation as someone who just wants peace and unity? The fifth and final sign someone is possessed by a Jezebel spirit is their pattern of creating destruction and division in relationships and communities while appearing innocent and victimized. This is perhaps the most heartbreaking manifestation of this spirit because it destroys the very foundations of trust, love, and unity that God designed to protect and strengthen us. Someone operating under this spirit has an almost supernatural ability to identify the weak points in relationships and communities, then exploit those weaknesses to create maximum chaos and division. They don't do this, obviously, or all at once. They do it slowly, carefully, and strategically, so that by the time people realize what's happening, the damage is already done, and they've moved on to their next target. Here's how this pattern typically unfolds in real life. They start by gathering information about the conflicts, tensions, and insecurities that already exist in a family, friend group, workplace, or church. They listen carefully to people's complaints about each other, their frustrations with leadership, and their personal struggles with trust and forgiveness. Then they use this information like seeds of discord that they plant in just the right places to create maximum destruction. They'll tell person A something that person B supposedly said about them, but they'll add just enough interpretation and emotional charge to make it sound worse than it actually was. They'll share person C's private struggles with person D, but frame it as concern rather than gossip. They'll position themselves as the peacemaker who's just trying to help everyone understand each other better, but somehow their help always makes things worse instead of better. The Jezebel spirit is also a master at playing the victim when people start to catch on to what's happening. When someone confronts them about their role in creating division, they'll act shocked and hurt that anyone would accuse them of such terrible behavior. They'll claim that they were just trying to help, that people are misunderstanding their motives, or that they're being attacked because they care too much about the truth. Here's what makes this pattern so devastating. By the time people realize what's been happening, the damage to relationships is often irreversible. Trust has been broken, secrets have been exposed, and people have said things to each other that can't be taken back. The person with the Jezebel spirit then moves on to a new community, a new church, or a new friend group, leaving behind a trail of broken relationships and wounded people who may never fully understand what happened to them. But here's the pattern that will help you identify this spirit before it destroys your relationships. Look for someone who always seems to be in the middle of other people's conflicts, but never takes responsibility for their role in creating or escalating those conflicts. Notice if there's someone who always has inside information about other people's private business and always has a reason why sharing that information was necessary or helpful. Pay attention to whether someone's presence in your community creates more unity or more division over time. Real peacemakers and genuine servants of God bring people together, heal wounds, and create stronger bonds between people. But someone operating under the Jezebel spirit will gradually erode trust, create suspicion, and turn people against each other while maintaining their image as someone who just wants everyone to get along. The most heartbreaking part of this pattern is how it affects innocent people who never saw it coming. Families that were strong and loving become fractured and bitter. Churches that were growing and unified become divided and suspicious. Friend groups that provided support and encouragement become sources of drama and pain. And the person responsible for all this destruction vanishes from the scene, often blaming the very people they manipulated for being too dramatic, too sensitive, or too unwilling to forgive and move on. After everything we've covered today, if you walk away from this video and go back to accepting manipulation, control, and spiritual abuse in your relationships, you're making a choice that will cost you years of peace, joy, and spiritual growth. You now have knowledge that most people never receive, and with that knowledge comes the responsibility to protect yourself and the people you love from these devastating spiritual attacks. Let me quickly remind you of the 5 signs we've covered. First, the seductive charm and false intimacy that makes you feel special but creates unhealthy dependency. Second, the manipulation and emotional control that makes you responsible for their feelings while they use your secrets against you. Third, the sexual seduction and inappropriate boundaries that compromise your values and create unhealthy soul ties. Fourth, the false spiritual authority that undermines your direct relationship with God. And fifth, the destruction and division that leaves broken relationships and wounded people in their wake. Now that you know these signs, you have the power to set healthy boundaries with people who display these behaviors. You can recognize when someone is trying to control you through spiritual, emotional, or sexual manipulation. You can trust your instincts when something feels wrong about a relationship, even if you can't immediately explain why. Your healing and recovery from any Jezebel Spirit influence you've experienced starts with prayer, spiritual discernment, and surrounding yourself with people who encourage your direct relationship with God rather than trying to control it. Seek godly counsel from mature believers who point you toward Scripture and toward God's voice rather than toward their own authority. Remember that freedom and healing are absolutely possible through spiritual warfare and proper understanding of how these spirits operate. You don't have to remain victim to manipulation, control, or spiritual abuse. God has given you everything you need to break free and walk in the liberty and peace He designed for your life. Don't keep this information to yourself. Share this video with people in your community who need this protection and understanding. The more people who can recognize these signs, the less power these spirits have to operate in secret and cause destruction. Right now, the YouTube algorithm is about to suggest the perfect next video for your spiritual growth and protection. That suggestion isn't random. It's designed to give you exactly what you need to continue building your defenses against spiritual attack. Click on that suggested video because your continued education and spiritual protection depends on staying informed about how the enemy operates in these last days. Your freedom is worth the investment of your time, so make that click and keep learning how to walk in victory and spiritual authority.